What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Homie Hangout, where we help others move in excellence. And this is an alarming video. It's particularly for people from California, but everybody should pay attention. It's particularly for parents, but everybody should pay attention. Those that have been around know that, A, I've never read an article on my channel. That's just not what my content is about. I'm going to do that today because the level of detail in the article in terms of figures and statistics and the research done in it, it's worded, just as well as I'd be able to say it, right? If not better. And so I'll link to the article in the description. Now, to be fair, the article is from the Daily Mail, which is not always the most reliable news source, right? They do a lot of tabloid stuff. But this I've also checked out through other sources, and it's legitimate, man, and it's scary. It should be scary for everybody. So I'm gonna read this article. My language is gonna have to be very sensitive, right? Because of YouTube censor. So I will be talking about S offenses, right? Be talking about people who, because of their convictions, would be labeled as something similar to the word file. And so I'll call them files. And we'll go from there. So I'm gonna read this article and then we're gonna talk about it afterwards, because I see some stuff that reminds me of like when Three Strikes came out and Poly Class and how they used these incidents to change the law, but then that law wound up applying even more regularly and more frequently to those who didn't fall in the category of the dude who targeted Poly Class, right? And so let me just read the article and we'll get into it. Like I said, I will link to this at the end of the video. So it says files are getting less than a year in prison after a range of horrific acts, including forcing kids under 14. Analysis of California's database of S offenders shows thousands of child M's are being let out after just a few months, despite sentencing guidelines. Current and former S crime prosecutors said the figures are terrifying and shameful. More than 7,000 S offenders were convicted of lewd and lascivious acts, people under 14, but were let out of prison the same year they were incarcerated, data from California's Megan Law database says. Others who committed some of the worst crimes against children on the statute books served similarly short sentences, including 365 files convicted of continuous abuse of a child who spent less than a year in prison, 39 cases of going the opposite way, right? Like the rear end with a kid under 16, and 3 cases of kidnapping a child under 14 with the intent to do horrible things to them. Former Los Angeles S crimes prosecutor Samuel Dordulian told the dailymail.com he was shocked by the statistics and described them as frightening to society. Now listen, follow through here. Statistics clearly show that files don't get reformed. They're going to come out and they're going to commit again, Dordulian said. Letting these people out early, we are allowing for a lot more victimization, and that is terrifying. It is unclear whether the Megan's Law database prison time statistics are similar for other states, as Daily Mail was only able to obtain S offender data for California. And there's actually some interesting stuff where the state has now made it where you can't see that stuff. I'll get into it in a minute. One offender in the database is Reseda, California resident Carlos Alexander Nahu, 48 years old, who was convicted of continuous abuse of a child in 2015. LA court records say he was charged in October 2014, pled no contest in January 2015, was sentenced to 2 days in LA County Jail and 5 years of probation. He now lives 1 block away from Royal Montessori School Daycare and 3 blocks from Reseda Elementary School, according to the Megan's Law database. Noah Thomas Hope from Watsonville in Santa Cruz County was convicted in 2013 of acts with an under 14-year-old, videos, possession, and exposure, right? The 31-year-old was convicted on a no contest plea in December 2013. Megan's Law data says he was released within a year, and according to his Facebook page, he started a new job at a manufacturing company, Threshold Enterprises in Scotts Valley, California in 2014. Holt has posted several pictures with a young girl on his Facebook page. He was also convicted of a DUI in 2017. Gualtiero Lopez Contreras, 47, was charged in May 2014 with, bottom stuff by use of force. It's just disgusting stuff, man. He took a plea deal from Fresno County prosecutors, pled no contest to one count of bad acts with a minor in February 2016, was given 3 years in Wasco State Prison. But the court record says he was given credits of 790 days. That leaves him 305 days to serve, less than a year. A Megan's Law record for Contreras from 3 years ago says he was released from prison in 2016. There was no longer a record for him in the current Megan's Law database. Let me scroll through. Mountain View resident Thierry Armand Costa, 61, was convicted in 2014 of acts with an under 14 and using a minor to make videos, but released from prison the same year, according to the database. Now, this is not just going to be profiles on different offenders, right? So stick with me through this, please. His Santa Clara County court records say he was sentenced for the crimes in November 2013, but had 2 probation motions heard in his case in 2015. He also had a hearing to remove his records from the courts in 2019. According to his LinkedIn page, he worked as vice president of marketing for a software company in the Bay Area from 2010 till 2013. Started his own company, Green Zone Security Software, between 2013 and 2015, got another VP role in 2015, blah, blah, blah. Suggests any prison time he served for those awful crimes was over by 2015. Like most states, California has a law requiring S offenders to register their address with the Department of Justice and to provide updates if they move houses. In 1996, the Clinton administration passed a law named after a file murder victim, Megan Conca, to require their information be published, Megan's Law. California's Megan Law website allows anyone to search for offenders with details including their name, age, residence, offenses, their mugshot, and the dates that they were last convicted and released from prison. Daily Mail compiled the data of the 54,986 S offenders who were listed on the website in July of 2019 and analyzed the results. It showed 41,794, or 76%, committed offenses involving children. So 76% of S offenders targeted children, right? Others, obviously would target predominantly like women or adults or whatever, but over 75% targeted children. DailyMail.com compared the published dates of these files' convictions versus the year they were released from prison, according to the Megan Law database. The results showed that the average file served 2 years and 10 months in prison. LA Attorney Dordulian said that was surprisingly very low. In my day in the LA's DA's office, we made every effort to get as long of a prison sentence as we could, because we knew that the minute they're going to come out, they're more likely to reoffend and another child is going to get harmed, he told the Daily Mail. The lawyer who now represents victims of such abuse pointed to policies backed by California Governor Gavin Newsom, allowing for the shortening of sentences to reduce the prison population. With Newsom, they've passed a lot of legislation where they are allowing for resentencing. They're allowing for people to come back, and there's a push to have less time spent in prison, Dordulian said. This is the politics part that I'm going to get into at the end. That has been the push for the last at least 5 years, letting people out of prison much earlier than what their sentences were for. But these types of individuals, they're not amenable to rehabilitation, which means that they don't respond to rehabilitation very well. And studies have shown that, he added. They're going to harm another child. That is actually true. Studies do show that those who target children in such a way actually have the highest recidivism and reoffending acts of any other offense. It's a very, very scary trend. According to the U.S. Department of Justice, such offenders, here we go, are at least 4 times more likely than other criminals to be rearrested for that type of crime. Some of the offenses committed by files in the Megan's Law database were misdemeanors, such as indecent exposure or attempting to send inappropriate pictures to kids, and they receive even less jail time. But the average time served for some severe and heinous crimes was similarly short. The most common offense in the database was lewd and lascivious acts with somebody under 14, committed 19,441 times. Despite its severity, the average time served for this crime was just 2 years and 11 months. And 7,152 files who committed this crime served less than a year. some 114 men who committed the even worse version of this offense, where it was by force or fear with somebody under 14, ended up serving less than a year in prison. Others serving less than 12 months included, and they go on to X amount of counts of aggravated types of assault. I'm not going to get into all of that. You guys get the gist of it, man. These are some of the most disgusting things that can be done to our most precious resource, which is children, right? Deputy DA John Hatami added that the problem of short prison time for files was getting worse, not better. He blamed Prop 57, a 2016 bill allowing early parole for nonviolent felons, which was supported by his boss, LA District Attorney George Gascon. George Gascon used to be the DA in San Francisco. Thousands of child victims are being denied justice, and George Gascon and his group of radical prosecutors can care less, Hatami said. CDCR is not even notifying the child victims and their families of these early releases. It's shameful. I'm not 100% sure on that. There may be instances in which they didn't. That might be a little bit of hyperbole. That might be a little bit of exaggeration to make it seem like nobody gets notified ever. Furthermore, most of these offenders who are released early have not been rehabilitated whatsoever. This will clearly endanger our future generation of children, obviously. It's a disgrace that the state of California is not prioritizing the safety and well-being of our children, says this politician / prosecutor, right? DailyMail.com was unable to conduct the analysis for offenders added to the database since 2019 because why? The California Department of Justice has added digital blocks on its website to prevent new data being gathered and analyzed. The department also refused to hand over a current copy of the database, which should be public under Megan's law, to this news outlet. And after we contacted the California Department of Justice asking about the shocking statistics, the search function was removed from the Megan's Law website, which is administered by the California Department of Justice. However, last week, the website did show that there are currently 61,770 such offenders listed across California's 58 counties, an increase of 12% since 2019. It is unclear how many of them target children. A spokesperson for the Attorney General said the issue was the responsibility of local DAs, courts, and state lawmakers. Public safety is a top priority for the California Department of Justice, the spokesperson said in an emailed statement. It's generally up to courts in conjunction with locally elected DAs to ensure the applicable statutes and sentencing guidelines are applied to cases based on the specific facts and circumstances. It's largely up to legislators to enact those statutes. Our office actively works with law enforcement across the state to protect our state's children and families, whether that's through conducting sting operations, targeting such predators, issuing guidance to reduce harm to exploited youth, launching, trafficking stuff. Our state's district attorneys are on the front lines of enforcing criminal statutes to protect public safety on behalf of 40 million people, blah, 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 right? And that's about it. So that's insane, right? That's insane. And this is on the heels of just a couple weeks ago, COs were arrested. Both of them had a history of working at Folsom in California for those such offenses. Those dudes are files, right? You had that cop from, I think it was Virginia, who just recently, he catfished this young girl and traveled all the way from California, whacked her grandparents, snatched her up, wound up dying in a shootout with police or whatever. A brief little Google search, man, this stuff happens in every state across the country, right? By law enforcement, basically. And obviously, most people who do this sort of thing are not law enforcement. But what we do know, just over history, is that those who target children often seek positions of authority, positions of trust, positions that insulate them from public scrutiny, right? Such as priests, right? Such as school teachers, such as cops and correctional officers and politicians, because those tend to be titles that is more than just a job, right? It confers, it gives you a certain level of status in the general society, which means you're not under so much scrutiny, and you have access to victims. And because of those titles, because of that status, victims oftentimes are reluctant to come forward, plus the embarrassment, the stigma, everything else, right? So they don't want to come forward and say anything. And in the case of young children, a lot of times they don't even have the ability to communicate the harm that's been done to them, right? They don't even know. They don't know how to voice that. Sometimes they don't even know that it's wrong, which is horrible, man. These types of offenses stick with somebody forever, right? They are life changing, and for some people, they're life crushing, right? They don't know how to move forward. That it destroys families, it destroys individuals. Yeah, I don't need to lecture you guys or try to convince you guys that this shit is out of pocket, because clearly it is. Um, and historically, those folks don't get punished by the system, right? They've always gotten favorable treatment. They've gotten favorable treatment in incarceration. They've gotten favorable treatment in the courts. Um, they get cut a lot of slack, no matter what their position in society is, right? They have advocacy groups for these types of individuals, which is again just unspeakable. You can't wrap your head around it, right? Oh well, it's an illness, it's not a crime, but come on. And even within our penal code, see, when Prop 57 was passed, and I'm not going to get into a long thing about Prop 57, right? It's basically allows for, people to do more time in the county than prison, people to get sentence reductions. Those that have already been sentenced, some of them can get some reduction depending on how they were sentenced, and enhancements and base offenses and all this other stuff, right? Um, those decisions for those that are already incarcerated, those are made by the board. Those are not made by the governor. The governor can't veto them. The law says that it's up to the board. The board does what it wants. And the attorney general is right in the sense of local DAs have a responsibility to prosecute this, and to prosecute these crimes more severely. And I can't for the life of me understand why, historically, at least in the state of California, such crimes don't get prosecuted. Like, they throw the book at quote unquote gang members, right? They were throwing the book at quote unquote drug dealers. They never throw the book at these people, ever, right? And in certain situations, certain isolated cases, sure. But most of these crimes are not news. They're not on the news, right? They don't get a lot of public attention. There's just a quiet little courtroom. Somebody goes in, they plead out, they get convicted, they're gone, right? They plead out, they get to walk home. They get arrested, they get released, no bond, no bail, on recognizance. Come on, man. And there is truth to them not being rehabilitated, it being very, very difficult to rehabilitate them. And yet they get this favorable treatment. And I don't understand it. I never have. Um, that being said, the flip side of this is some political posturing. It is convenient outrage, right? When they say stuff like, "Oh man, George Gascon and his liberal people, that's politics. That's politics." 3 strikes got passed because Richard Allen Davis snatched a child poly class, did unmentionable things, and wound up taking her life, and had prior offenses, prior violent felonies. And so people passed 3 strikes to stop people like him from getting out of prison and being able to reoffend and harm folks. Who winds up catching life sentences? A whole range of people with a whole range of backgrounds. Who's not getting life sentences for shit like that? Those people. Those people. They're not just not getting life sentences, like they're getting slaps on the wrist. And so let's be careful and pause at the political opportunism, right? Opportunism. That's a word. It's a word today. Let's be aware of that. Let's be mindful of that, because what they're gonna do is try to turn around and be like, look, this Prop 57 needs to be rolled back. Don't cut any slack to convicts or people convicted of crimes. don't cut any slack to nonviolent offenders, because if you do, people like this, that's how they get out. But that is going to impact a much bigger number of people than that segment who commits those types of offenses, right? And DAs know that. And they know that once they can get something on the books, then they can manipulate and tweak it and play with it in court and stretch the definitions in ways that bring them money. Because incarceration is a financial process in this country, right? It's financially motivated. There's a lot of money in incarceration, especially in the incarceration of people who don't otherwise produce tax dollars, right? Who otherwise don't contribute to the economy in conventional ways. They don't work, so they don't pay taxes, whatever, quote unquote. But we lock them up and they provide jobs for other people through their incarceration. That's a whole nother spiel. I've talked about it before. I'll do it again later on down the line. But I don't want to make this too long of a video. I just check Megan's Law. Check what's going on around your neighborhood and where you live. Who lives around you? I'm not encouraging vigilante justice. I want to be very clear about that. I'm not encouraging the harm of anybody, but I am encouraging people to be vigilant and be mindful of who's in their community, in particular, if they have children or young people that come around their house, family, grandkids, whatever, right? Be mindful of that. Be alert. And you know, a lot of times, man, people feel like, oh, I don't want to get carried away, or I don't want to be dramatic or this. A lot of times you get a vibe, right? And you can't base your whole life off vibes. You know, vibes are not measurable, they're not scientific, but you know, your spidey senses get to kicking up, man. Listen to those, trust those. If your kids come forward and they say that some stuff has happened that when you hear it, it strikes you as questionable, push that line, investigate it. And who cares who's, you know, feathers get ruffled? Who cares? Nothing, man. That's a child. And we need to protect our children. Nobody else is going to. Clearly, the system's not going to. They got no problem locking up the fathers of children, but yet they let those who prey on children run around like, you know, it's free reign. So be careful, but also don't fall for the okie doke in California. Don't fall for the whole thing of now we need this sweeping law to keep these files off the street, but that law is going to wind up hurting a hell of a lot more people than them. They always get a break. They always get cut slack. I don't know why. I don't. But they do. They do. And it's horrible. If you have ideas why, if you think you know why, leave a comment. So tap in. We can have this conversation. It's called the Homie Hangout for a reason. Help others move in excellence, man. That's what homies do. Help yourself at the same time because you're worth it. And let's help these kids by being their eyes and ears and being their protectors. You know, they didn't ask to be born into this world, man. It's our obligation to provide them a world that is safe and secure and as welcoming as best as we can. That's it, man. Check out the content. Subscribe if you know you like the hit the little bell notifications. All the shit YouTubers want you to do. I want you to do the same thing. Catch you on the next one.